Chapter 1. An Army of Clay Beneath the Fields. In the spring of 1974, farmers digging a well in the dry fields near Mount Li, in Shaanxi province, struck something hard. Out of the earth came the head of a life-sized man made of clay. They had not found a god, as some first thought. They had broken into the buried guard of the most powerful ruler in Chinese history. Archaeologists soon uncovered pit after pit holding an entire army, thousands of terracotta soldiers, archers, charioteers, and horses. Each one standing in silent ranks, each face modeled as if from life. They had been waiting underground for more than 2,000 years. The army had been built to protect one man in death, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. He had united warring kingdoms into a single empire, given it laws, roads, and one written script, and then tried to defeat death itself. This is the true story of that emperor, what he truly did, and where the famous tales grow uncertain. Chapter 2. The Age of Warring States. To understand the first emperor, picture the China he was born into, a land at war with itself. For over 2 centuries, the region had been splintered into rival kingdoms that fought without end. Historians call this the Warring States period, and it was as brilliant as it was bloody. 7 great states dominated the rest: Qin, Chu, Qi, Yan, Han, Zhao, and Wei. Their kings raised huge armies of conscripted farmers, fielded iron weapons and crossbows, and built long defensive walls. Battles could swallow tens of thousands of lives in a single day. Yet, it was also a golden age of ideas. Wandering thinkers offered rival visions of how to bring order from chaos. The followers of Confucius preached virtue, and ritual, others called legalists, argued that only strict law and harsh punishment could tame human beings. Out of this storm of war and philosophy, one Western state was quietly growing stronger than all the rest, the state of Qin. Chapter 3. A boy becomes king of Qin. The man who would be first emperor was born around 259 BC and named Ying Zheng. His early life reads like a court drama. He was born in the state of Zhao, where his father lived as a royal hostage, far from the Qin throne he was not expected to inherit. Fortune turned. His father became king of Qin, helped by a rich merchant politician named Lu Bue. And when his father died, the boy Ying Zheng took the throne at about 13 years old. He was far too young to rule alone, so for years Lu Bue governed as his powerful regent. The young king grew up surrounded by ambition, plots, and danger. As a teenager, he watched palace scandals destroy those around him, and in time, he pushed Lu Bue aside and seized full control himself. By his early 20s, Ying Zheng was master of the most disciplined war machine in China, and he had no intention of sharing the world with 6 rival kings. Chapter 4. The Wars of Unification. From 230 BC, Ying Zheng launched a campaign unlike any before it, the conquest of all China. His strategy was patient and ruthless: befriend the distant states, crush the near ones, and swallow the rivals one by one. Han fell first. In 230 BC, 2 years later, Qin armies overran Zhao. Wei was drowned out when its capital was flooded and fell around 225 BC. Then came the hardest prize, vast southern Chu, which broke a first Qin army before the veteran general Wang Jian returned with a reported 600,000 men and conquered it by 223 BC. Yan and finally Qi followed, until in 221 BC the last king surrendered. In barely 9 years, 7 warring kingdoms had become one. Qin's success rested on more than numbers: strict military discipline, rewards for soldiers who proved themselves in battle, mass-produced iron and bronze weapons, and an administration that turned farmers into soldiers and grain into armies. The centuries of civil war were over. China was unified by force. Chapter 5. The First Emperor. A king who ruled all China needed a title no mere king had worn. In 221 BC, Ying Zheng declared that king was no longer enough. He combined two ancient words for legendary sage rulers and called himself Huangdi, August Emperor. He took the name Qin Shi Huang, the first August Emperor of Qin. Shi meant first, for he expected his line to rule for 10,000 generations. His heirs, he decreed, would simply be numbered, second emperor, third emperor, and so on, forever. It was a bold remaking of what a ruler could be. The emperor placed himself above all others, the single point on which the whole empire turned. He adopted the color black and the element water as emblems of his reign, following the cosmic theories of his day. He referred to himself with a special pronoun reserved for the emperor alone. No one in Chinese history had claimed such authority. The very word for emperor that he invented would be used in China for the next 2,000 years, down to the 20th century. Chapter 6. One rule for all under heaven. Winning the empire was one thing, holding it together was another. The newly conquered lands spoke in different scripts, traded with different coins, and measured grain by different cups. Qin Shi Huang set out to make them one. Guided by his chief minister Li Si, the emperor ordered sweeping standardization. The many regional forms of writing were replaced by a single official script, often called the small seal script, so that a document written in the far south could be read in the north. Coins were standardized into round bronze pieces with a square hole. Weights and measures were fixed by law, with official standard sets sent across the empire. He even standardized the axle width of carts, so wheels would fit the same ruts on every road. A small detail that reveals a vast ambition, a single system reaching into daily life everywhere. To govern, he abolished the old noble fiefs and divided the empire into commanderies and counties, run by appointed officials. China would be ruled not by birth, but by administration. Chapter 7. Law without mercy. The Qin state had risen by a hard philosophy called legalism, and as emperor, Qin Shi Huang ruled by it. Legalists believed people were naturally selfish, and that only clear laws, strict rewards, and severe punishments could hold a state together. Virtue and tradition, they argued, were luxuries a strong ruler could not depend on. In practice, this meant a society organized with astonishing tightness. Families were grouped into units responsible for one another's conduct, so that a single person's crime could bring punishment on neighbors who failed to report it. Punishments were heavy, hard labor, mutilation, and death. Loyalty and obedience were demanded above all. This system made Qin efficient and feared. It built roads, filled granaries, and mobilized armies on a scale no rival could match. But it pressed down hard on ordinary people, and it left little room for dissent or kindness. The same iron discipline that conquered China would, within a few short years, help turn the empire's own subjects against the dynasty that ruled them. Chapter 8. Walls against the north. Beyond the empire's northern edge rode the Xiongnu, mounted nomads of the steppe, whose raids the settled farmlands feared. To guard against them, Qin Shi Huang sent his great general Meng Tian north with a huge army, driving the nomads back and seizing land along the frontier. To hold that frontier, the emperor ordered the old defensive walls of the former northern states to be joined, and extended into one immense barrier of rammed earth, stretching for thousands of li across mountains and desert. This was an early ancestor of what later ages would rebuild in stone as the Great Wall of China. Though the famous brick wall tourists see today was largely built many centuries later, under the Ming Dynasty. The cost in human life was staggering. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers, convicts, and conscripted laborers were marched to the frontier to build it, and many never returned. The wall protected the empire, but it was also remembered in folk songs and stories as a monument to suffering, a theme that would echo through Chinese memory for centuries. Chapter 9. The Burning of the Books. E, K, Yai, T, Wen Ti, Che, 咬踢跟啊. One of the darkest stories told about Qin Shi Huang is the burning of books and burying of scholars. According to the account, around 213 BC, the minister Li Si persuaded the emperor that scholars who praised the past and criticized the present were dangerous. The emperor is said to have ordered many books destroyed, histories of the conquered states, and the classics treasured by Confucian scholars, keeping only practical works on farming, medicine, and divination, and copies held by the state. A year later, the story goes, the emperor had a number of scholars executed at the capital, accused of deceiving him. How much of this is true is genuinely debated. The fullest account comes from the historian Sima Qian, writing about a century later under the Han Dynasty, which had overthrown the Qin and had every reason to blacken its memory. Modern historians question the scale of the burning, and even how the scholars died. Something harsh almost certainly happened, but the lurid details should be treated as disputed, not as settled fact. Chapter 10. The Search for Endless Life. For all his power, Qin Shi Huang feared one enemy he could not conquer, death. As he grew older, the emperor became obsessed with finding the secret of immortality, and surrounded himself with magicians and alchemists who promised an elixir of eternal life. He sent expeditions to search for the legendary islands of the immortals in the Eastern Sea. The most famous, led by a court magician named Shu Fu, is said to have sailed off with a great company of young people, and never returned, sailing, by one later legend, all the way to the islands of Japan. Whether any such voyage truly happened, we cannot say for certain. The emperor also swallowed potions his alchemists prepared, some of which, according to tradition, contained mercury, believed then to hold the power of life because it shimmered and flowed like something alive. Tragically, mercury is a poison. Many historians suspect that the very cures meant to make him immortal may have damaged his health and helped bring on his death. Chapter 11. A Tomb Like a World. While he hunted for eternal life, Qin Shi Huang was also building a place to rule in death. From early in his reign, vast labor gangs labored for decades on his tomb near Mount Li, a project the historian Sima Qian says employed hundreds of thousands of workers. The Terracotta army discovered in 1974 guards the outer reaches of this enormous burial complex. But the heart of it, the emperor's actual tomb mound, has never been opened. According to Sima Qian, beneath the mound lies an entire underground world, a model of his empire with rivers and seas of flowing mercury, a ceiling set with the stars, palaces and treasures, and traps with crossbows set to fire on intruders. How much of that description is accurate? No one yet knows, because the tomb remains unexcavated to protect what may lie inside. Strikingly, modern soil tests have found unusually high levels of mercury in the ground above the mound, a haunting hint that at least part of the ancient account may be true. Chapter 12. Death on the Road and a Rotting Secret. In 210 BC, Qin Shi Huang was traveling the empire on one of his grand inspection tours when he fell ill and died, far from the capital. He was about 49 years old. He had never named an heir openly, and his sudden death set off one of history's most sinister cover-ups. According to Sima Qian, only a few people knew the emperor was dead: his chief minister Li Si, the youngest prince Hu Hai, and a scheming eunuch named Zhao Gao. Fearing chaos if the news got out before they reached the capital, they kept the death secret. As the body decayed in the summer heat, they are said to have packed a cart with salted fish, so that the stench would not betray the rotting corpse to onlookers along the road. In secret, the conspirators forged the emperor's orders. They commanded the rightful heir, the elder Prince Fuzhu, to take his own life, and they placed the pliable Hu Hai on the throne instead, a betrayal that would doom the dynasty. Chapter 13. The empire that fell in a heartbeat. Qin Shi Huang had dreamed of a dynasty lasting 10,000 generations. It lasted barely 4 years after his death. His son ruled as the second emperor, but real power lay with the eunuchs Zhao Gao, who turned the court into a nest of murder and fear. The harsh Qin laws, the crushing taxes, and the endless forced labor on walls, roads, and the Great Tomb had exhausted the people. The spark came when a group of conscripts, delayed by rain and facing execution for being late, decided they might as well rebel. Their uprising lit a fire across the land. Rebellions erupted everywhere. The brilliant minister Li Si was executed. Zhao Gao murdered the second emperor and was killed in turn. In 207 BC, the last Qin ruler surrendered, and the capital was sacked. Out of the chaos rose a new dynasty, the Han, which would rule China for 400 years, and which would shape forever how the first emperor was remembered. Chapter 14. The Tyrant in Memory. For most of the next 2,000 years, Qin Shi Huang was remembered as a monster. The cruel tyrant who burned books, buried scholars, worked his people to death, and built an empire on fear. Much of this picture comes from the Han dynasty that replaced him. Han historians, above all Sima Qian, wrote the fullest accounts we have, and they had reason to contrast Qin cruelty with Han virtue. Confucian scholars never forgave the emperor who had supposedly tried to destroy their books and silence their teachers. For century after century, his name was a warning about what happens when a ruler governs by raw power alone. Yet even his fiercest critics could not deny what he had built. The very unity of China, the idea that all these lands and peoples belong together under one government, one script, one set of laws, was his lasting work. Later emperors who condemned his cruelty still ruled the unified empire he had forged. He was hated, and he was unavoidable. Chapter 15. The Man Who Made China. Strip away the legends, and one fact towers above the rest. Qin Shi Huang made China a single country, and it has remained one through countless dynasties, collapses, and rebirths ever since. Many scholars believe the very word China, used across the world today, descends from the name of his dynasty, Qin. The empire he hammered together by conquest set a pattern that would outlast him by more than 20 centuries. A vast realm governed as one, by a single emperor and a trained bureaucracy, sharing one written language even where spoken tongues differed. When his Terracotta army was unearthed in 1974, the world rediscovered him not only as a tyrant, but as one of history's great state builders. Modern China has reckoned with him in many ways, sometimes condemning his cruelty, sometimes admiring his unifying will. Few rulers anywhere have left so deep a mark on so many lives for so long. The first emperor wanted to be remembered forever. In that, at least, he succeeded. Chapter 16. How the Empire was Governed. Behind the conquests and monuments lay something quieter, but just as revolutionary, a new way of running a state. Qin Shi Huang and Li Si swept away the old world, in which power passed through noble families who ruled their own lands almost like kings. In its place, they built a centralized administration. The empire was divided into commanderies, and those into counties, each governed by officials the emperor appointed, and could dismiss, not lords who inherited their seats. These officials reported upward in a chain that reached the throne, kept records on bamboo slips, collected taxes, registered households, and enforced the law uniformly. It was, in effect, one of the world's first great bureaucratic empires, run by paperwork and appointment rather than bloodline. This machinery of government proved so effective that even after the Qin dynasty fell, the Han kept much of it and refined it. The bureaucratic state that would define imperial China for 2,000 years was first assembled, in its harsh early form, under the first emperor. Chapter 17. The Faces of the Clay Army. Return at the end to the army that revealed him. The terracotta warriors are not just a wonder of scale, They are a window into the Qin world. Made around the time of unification, they show us how Qin soldiers really stood, dressed, and armed themselves. There are foot soldiers, kneeling and standing archers, charioteers, and officers, arranged in battle formation. Each warrior is life-sized, and remarkably, the faces appear individualized, as if modeled to suggest real men rather than copies of one mold. They were made from standard body parts assembled, and then finished by hand, mass production, and craftsmanship together, a perfect emblem of the Qin state. Once, they were painted in bright colors, and many held real bronze weapons, some so well made they were still sharp when found. Today most stand in muted gray, their paint lost to time and air. Row upon row, they keep their 2,000-year watch over an emperor who tried to take his empire and his power with him into the dark. Chapter 18. Where the story comes from. How do we know any of this? Our picture of the first emperor rests on a mix of evidence, and weighing it carefully is the heart of honest history. The richest written source by far is the records of the grand historian, the Shiji by Sima Qian, composed roughly a century after Qin Shi Huang's death, under the rival Han dynasty. It is a magnificent work, but it was written by people with reason to judge the Qin harshly, and many of its most dramatic scenes cannot be checked against other records. So we read it with respect and with caution. Against the texts, we can set hard physical evidence. The Terracotta Army and Tomb Complex, excavated Qin legal documents written on bamboo, surviving coins, weights, and stretches of early frontier wall. These objects often confirm the broad outline, a powerful, organized, demanding state, even where they cannot confirm a particular tale. Good history means holding both kinds of evidence together, trusting the contemporary objects most, and saying plainly when a famous story is uncertain. Chapter 19. What we really know. So who was Qin Shi Huang? Once the legends are set gently aside, the firm ground is this: born Ying Zheng around 259 BC. He became king of Qin as a boy, took full power as a young man, and between 230 and 221 BC conquered the 6 rival states to unify China for the first time. He took the title First Emperor, ruled by the harsh creed of legalism, and standardized the script. Coinage, weights, measures, and even cart axles of his vast realm. He linked frontier walls against the northern nomads, built roads, and raised an immense tomb guarded by a terracotta army. He died in 210 BC. And his dynasty collapsed within a few years. The rest, the full horror of the book, burning. The mercury rivers flowing in his sealed tomb. The magician who sailed to find the immortals is disputed, legendary, or simply unproven. We honor history best by seeing the achievement and the cruelty clearly, side by side. He unified China and gave it perhaps its very name. He remains one of the most consequential human beings who ever lived. A note on history and sources. Writing the life of a ruler who died more than 2,000 years ago means weighing very different kinds of evidence. For Qin Shi Huang, the fullest written source by far is the records of the grand historian, the Shiji of Sima Qian, composed around a century after the emperor's death under the Han dynasty that had replaced the Qin. It is a magnificent and indispensable work, but it was written by people with reason to judge the Qin harshly, and many of its most dramatic scenes cannot be checked against other records. This book leans on it gratefully, and with caution. Several of the most famous stories in this book are therefore marked as disputed. The scale of the burning of books and burying of scholars is debated. Modern historians question how many books were truly destroyed, and even how or whether scholars were buried alive, and note that the account comes chiefly from later, hostile Han-era sources. The book reports that something harsh happened, while making clear that the lurid details are uncertain. The emperor's search for an elixir of immortality, including the magician Xu Fu's legendary voyage to the Islands of the Immortals, and the description of rivers and seas of mercury flowing inside his tomb both come from Sima Qian. They are presented here as tradition and legend. Strikingly, modern soil surveys have detected unusually high mercury levels above the burial mound, which remains unexcavated. The tomb chamber itself has never been opened, so its contents are still unknown. Where this book describes hard, physical evidence, the Terracotta army and the wider mausoleum complex, excavated Qin legal documents written on bamboo, surviving standardized coins and weights, and stretches of early frontier wall, it stands on firmer ground. Such objects confirm the broad outline of a powerful, organized, and demanding state, even where they cannot confirm a particular tale. Useful and reputable starting points include the Encyclopaedia Britannica, the World History Encyclopedia, the British Museum, UNESCO, and Smithsonian Magazine, together with the translated records of the Grand Historian. This book paraphrases its sources and does not invent or quote at length any words attributed to Qin Shi Huang or other real people. The Han Chinese dress, armor, and architecture shown are interpretive reconstructions informed by Qin-era art and archaeology. No authenticated lifetime portrait of the first emperor survives. Illustrations in this book are artistic interpretations created with the assistance of artificial intelligence image generation tools. They are not photographs, historical portraits, or verified contemporary depictions of any person. About griot. Griot brings world history to life through striking, carefully researched illustrated stories, its empires, its thinkers, and its turning points, for curious readers everywhere. Copyright 2026. Published independently via Griot.